Welcome back to Thinking About Therapy.
I'm delighted to be joined today by Michaela Mc Daid. I'm delighted that you accepted my invitation to come and talk about ecotherapy. This is the first time that Michaela and I have met. There's been no practice run at this conversation, but I'm feeling really excited and curious to see what comes up and find out a bit more about you and about ecotherapy.
I'm delighted to be here. I've even got my cup of coffee. That's how unrehearsed we are.
And I've got my tea, so we're all good. We're good to go. That's everything we need, I think, for a good conversation. In terms of, I suppose, for myself, I know very little about ecotherapy, and I only really came across it. I'm not actually sure. I came across it accidentally on Facebook, your own page, and I found myself just being really interested to the point that I would even go check and see, I wonder what's been happening today, and trying to get a sense of, what it's about, particularly because I've moved home as well, and we have such a nice nature around us. So I suppose, if you didn't mind, tell me a wee bit about what got you into ecotherapy or how that came about.
Ecotherapy very basically is connecting with nature for better mental health, and the benefits of being in nature being used in a therapeutic way, and the connection. So maybe how I got into it probably is quite relevant. My personal and professional background ran in parallel. I've worked in mental health for 25 years. Professionally, I always worked in education. Mental health education was my passion. My belief was that when you empower someone by giving them the tools and the information, so they're agents of their own recovery. So I worked devising and delivering mental health training programs right throughout the Northwest. This was wonderful work. I loved doing it. One of the huge benefits was the cross-section of people that I worked with. I worked a lot in schools and community groups and church groups and the prison population and LGBTQ groups. And so it was very much a cross-section, which was an honor for me because I was getting a very much, a broad view of people's experiences of mental health and in the system and out of it. So whilst I was doing that, it was a lot of supporting, it was a lot of listening ear and the education. And I kept hearing the same things over and over again. Do you know, when you ask what helps, do you know, around your mental health, wherever you are in the spectrum, regardless of diagnoses, just what makes you feel better. And it kept coming back to me, Patricia. It was fishing. It's my wee dog. If I get out a walk, see if I get to the beach, when I'm in the garden, turning the soil. So what's relevant here is that this was a huge diversity of people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and without direction. They were all telling me this nature was the theme.
Yeah.
People also spoke about, of course, talking and different things, but this was a theme that I wasn't seeing reflected in services.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't seeing anything in services that celebrated the importance of nature and the outdoors.
Yeah.
And I knew that because I was in services, because parallel to my professional background, my own experience of mental ill health was, throughout my adult life. I had been diagnosed with depression and then with bipolar. I had experienced suicidal ideation. I had been hospitalized. I had been medicated to the hilt. I had engaged in various talking therapies. And again, there was something missing, is the way I always describe it. There was something missing. So with this realization from the people I was working with, I kind of looked back at my own history and realized when I lived in London and I was struggling, I went to Hampstead Heath. When I lived in Derry and I was struggling, I took the dog on the country roads way outside the city. Even when I was a patient in Grantia Hospital, my greatest motivation for getting off suicide watch was so that I could get to the woods beside the hospital. So I tuned into this and I thought, the more unwell I am, the stronger the pull. Something in me intuitively is telling me I need nature. Yeah. I need the solace of nature. So I had my hold on a minute moment, of which I've had plenty. Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. I'm not having this. I was still working. It was a lot of community-based work that I did. That was kind of where my heart was. And I was offered another role, and it was a great job, and it was going to be well paid and all of the rest of it. I had moved to Donegal, to a wee cottage outside Ramelton, and this job was going to mean leaving the house at 7 a.m, getting back at 7 p.m, and I just went, no, just no. So that's me, how long a minute.
Another one.
You know what? No. So now at this time, I didn't know the word ecotherapy. I didn't understand it as a discipline. This was all very much led by my intuition. This was just, this feels right. So I didn't take the big, well-paid job. I spent time in the wee cottage. I did a wee bit of freelance work just to keep myself financially sustained. It was just about sustaining myself. I didn't really earn much, to be honest. But I fully immersed myself in nature. I gardened, I hill walked, I sea swam. I did a lot of writing as well. This is another part of it for me, is the creativity. And it's important that I did note that I did it gradually and carefully. But I reduced all of my medications in line with how much I was increasing my time with nature. And that was 5 years ago. And my mental health has never been better. What I now believe that I had done, I had applied ecotherapy to my own recovery without knowing that that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
So to me, it was, like I say, the personal and the professional had kind of been running in parallel.
Yeah.
And therapies where they met.
Yeah.
They just went, oh.
Sounds wonderful that that's something that happened so organically for you, you know, and that it sounds like it was a slow and a gradual kind of build up for you, but the fact that the two things did align, you know, personally and professional, and that, as you said, ecotherapy was the thing that kind of tied them together. Maybe you didn't know that at the time, but it's lovely to be able to look back and see that.
And see that. And then I was very lucky when that happened. I became aware of a program in Donegal called Solace, and I had just moved to Donegal. So whether it's the universe or whatever, once I'd had this kind of realization and where I was up to, I secured a post working in Solace. Solace is a partnership between the HSE and the IDP.
Okay.
A mental health recovery program using walking, talking in green spaces. Been running for 10 years in Falcara. And just as I was at this kind of moment, this juncture, they opened a service in Buncrana in Inishowen, where I had moved to. So my role in Solace is kind of twofold. It's the ecotherapy, but also the peer support, which is the other part that I think works very well. So then in Solace, I had the experience of working with other people in recovery from mental ill health, using a model of walking, talking in green spaces, and seeing the impact. Patricia, it was just incredible to see. And I do laugh about it a wee bit because, you know, when you step back and say, Solace is described as groundbreaking and, you know, innovative. I think, we're walking and talking in green spaces. How far away have we come from ourselves?
Yeah,
that this
that's
is a
not
way
innovative.
out there concept that this is good for people. How is that innovative? Fresh air, exercise, and feeling connected to others is good for your mental health.
It does say a lot though about how far away we have come from in terms of understanding if we are, and don't get me wrong, it's a great initiative, but even the fact that we are saying it is groundbreaking, like that says a lot.
Yes, it does. And I think that is, and so this is what for me, ecotherapy is a lot to do with. It's stripping away the layers and going back to something very simple, very basic. And the power in that, I think, is sometimes lost. You know, the power of simplicity has been lost. And just getting back to that.
I think that's it. I think I just as you're talking there, I'm thinking about it with my own clients and stuff, thinking sometimes how often that is often the first thing people suggest as something they could try and do differently is maybe I could get out for a walk. That the motivation isn't always there, but for anybody who does do it, the impact of that is always really significant for everything else. So, and it is, I think you're right, that idea of stripping things back, to try and get in touch with that a little bit more. And it sounds very simple, but it's a very powerful thing when people do it, I find anyway.
And the motivation, funny you say that, the motivation piece is part of how I kind of structured or planned my own practice and how I would work within it, because I was very well aware of that motivation and how difficult it is.
Yeah.
So by facilitating it, if you like, that first step, making that first step really easy for people.
Yeah.
Whether it's to go on a hike or forest bathing or whatever, if people have it, that the time, the place, the group is there, everything's kind of done for you.
Yeah.
And so that first initial step, I think it's human nature. Even in Solace, our participants are so engaged and committed. They will never miss a walk, but they all say it's a lot more difficult to get up and get myself out in the morning. But if I know I'm meeting the group at 10 o'clock and that you'll be missed, if you're not there, there's people there that'll be, you're part of something.
Wondering where you are. Yeah. Yeah. And is in Solace in particular, then, is it something that the walks and things, are they always done in a group, or are they ever done on a kind of one-to-one?
Solace is a group program. So of course we've got pre and during COVID, the way we're working is very different. Pre-COVID, we meet in the exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an important part too. Sit around a table and have tea and toast and we chat. And then we have a minibus and we go to green spaces in Inishowen, or blue spaces. I like the beach as well, don't have to be green spaces. So it could be Ballyliffin, it could be Inch, it could be the Shore Path in Buncrana. As you say, the spaces we have are just incredible. It's a considerable, most of our walks are about 6 or 7 kilometres, so it's a good, over an hour.
Yeah.
The point is that when you're walking and talking in a group as well, it's a lot of the things that just happen naturally and organically, again, that are the most kind of powerful. So myself and my colleague, and we would have usually about 10 participants. They've engaged in the programme for 2 years. So we've risk assessed all the walks and done all that. And we just walk and we talk. And you're shoulder to shoulder. So whilst you're walking in a group, you and I may be chatting for a wee while. And then naturally, somebody walks a bit quicker or the path narrows and you naturally go ahead and somebody else. So what I find, it's particularly beneficial for people for whom the social interaction is difficult. Maybe there's an anxiety there around, engaging face to face.
Yeah.
People who feel like that feel very comfortable because there's absolutely no pressure. You can be on the walk for over an hour and you might chat about football or the weather for 10 minutes if that's where you're up to.
Yeah.
Or you may feel you want to talk about something more difficult, but it's absolutely up to you. You lead how much you talk, who you talk to. We do a big part of it, so it's the walking and the exercise. The group connection is huge, and the noticing. Again, this is come back to something very basic. What do you notice on your walk today?
Mm-hmm.
Encouraging people to look out at the sky and the trees and the wee things. And we, if at all possible, we eat outdoors. So the flasks of tea come out and the sandwiches come out. And then we have what we call like a wee diary. And the diary is just that. What did you notice in your walk today? And we bring it back to something around our mental health, whether it's our sleeping or, what recovery means to us. The value of it, apart from the ecotherapy, the outdoors, is the group connection.
Yeah.
And people supporting each other. Because I think what happens as well is that we know it's good. It feels good for me to be of service to someone else. And so for two people who are in recovery, that peer support part is very, very valuable.
Yeah.
And if someone's in a better place today and they're just chatting to someone else who's maybe struggling a wee bit, it helps both parties.
Yeah.
Do you know, for me
Yeah.
to be, the listener today, that gives me a great sense of value and a great so solace. Now in COVID, we are still able to meet because we're outdoors. Currently now, just as restrictions tightened, we're doing one-to-one walks. That normally wouldn't be the case, but that's just to keep something, to have some kind of service.
Yeah. Do you notice a difference for you in the one-to-one walks and the group walks?
That's a really good question, actually. Yes. And I think there's such value in both.
Yeah.
Now, the reason we're doing the one-to-one walks now is just the circumstances. I don't know if it would be the case, though. The one-to-one walks at the minute are very valuable because we've been walking with the participants for over a year.
Yeah.
So there's a relationship there and we know the people. And I think that one-to-one time is very valuable, because having said there's huge benefit in this very organic, fluid way that we normally walk, it can be the case that someone wants that one-to-one attention.
Yeah.
So the one-to-one walks, I don't know if we had started with them, if they would have been the same.
Yeah.
I think the fact that we had a relationship, we know the people before we're doing that. But apart from anything else, though, I'm walking about 100 miles an hour. Because I meet one person and go walk and then come back and meet the next person and go walk with them. My fitness levels. There's a lot of scope there, though, Patricia. I see a lot of I did training with an eco-psychologist based in Dublin, and an awful lot of, talking therapies, and he's a psychologist by training. He does his work, but he just does it outdoors.
Yeah.
The extra benefit of, the outdoors and nature. So even that, I always think there's room for everything. My personal interest is in the holding space and the listening ear, and just someone's voice being heard without any kind of analysis or fixing or anything else. I'm just listening to you, and I'm here for you,
Yeah. And I think that's such an important part of therapy, of any type of therapy. Like I always say, no matter like how many different trainings you go on and all of that, ultimately part of our job, it comes back to people feeling like they've been heard, and the power in that, when somebody feels like they've actually been heard, not whenever you hand them a worksheet to do something or ask them to go home and do something between sessions. Whenever somebody sits and says, I actually feel like you've heard what I've said, that to me is the most powerful thing about our job. And it's not, we don't see a lot of it in everyday life.
And I think that's exactly the amount of people, through the years who I know are, if I can say, deep in the system.
Yeah.
They've got layers of support, and all they wanted was their voice heard.
Yeah.
And I know myself and I benefited greatly from counselling when I was unwell. But even then, I remember thinking it was the 1 hour in the week that somebody was listening to me.
Yeah.
I was a single parent, I was running, and it was that 1 hour that I was being heard. That was that. And I think you're right, though. I think part of why that's even more important now is that we've lost, people used to chat more. Do you know the wee conversations at a bus stop or over the garden fence? Those were the wee conversations where, if I can use the word, offloading or venting, before something became a huge issue, people used to chat. This is annoying me or whatever, and it wasn't therapy. It was just a chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the more that's been lost, creating the space for that is really important. I think it's a human need.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think exactly that what you said there in terms of that, we look at how many people have neighbors that they just don't know, and how that compares to years ago where they would have, as you said, had chats over the garden fence. But even I think a lot of people's workplaces have become, and particularly even more so with COVID, where they're working on their own. And so in the past, where you would have been getting into work and having a chat and venting about something that happened, all that, like, we're becoming more and more isolated. This is a conversation that I've had recently with somebody. We're doing it to ourselves too. We're not really stopping and saying, hang on a minute, I don't want to be working in an office on my own. I'd rather be in a group office,
Yes.
and getting that social connection.
Yes.
And I think perhaps that maybe that's one of the things that might come out of COVID, and with these restrictions that we can't socialize as much, maybe people will realize the importance of that. Because to me, everybody that I talk to, that's what people are missing, being able to connect with other people. And that, again, it's not that that's anything groundbreaking or anything like that, but it's like, yeah, we just need to strip back and go, yeah, we do need to be around other people, of course.
Yes, it's the simplicity, the simplicity of it, and it's a human need. It really is. And I used to joke about it too. When people talked about small talk,
Yeah.
maybe get a wee bit kind of frustrated with it. I said and it's not only people that live alone, but for some people that's their human interaction for the day.
Yeah.
The getting the pint of milk and it's a good day, or the weather, or whatever that is, and it's there's huge value in it.
In terms of the ecotherapy, is it walks primarily, or I notice you yourself do a lot of swimming? Is that something that many brave people do? Because I can't see myself ever getting in the water when it's so cold.
You can paddle, Patricia. Paddling is allowed. Paddling is allowed. We don't. The sea swimming is something that has really taken off this year.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 380% increase in people taken to the sea. Again, for me, that was an intuitive thing.
Okay.
It was a couple of years ago, and I love swimming anyway. I just kept getting into the water because it felt good. It was as simple as that. And the cold water, I just felt reset. I felt invigorated. It felt good. Now, this is a time when no one else was doing it, so I was getting some funny looks, but that's all right. I just waved at people. Hello, hi, I'm getting out. But again, how that came about for me was that it felt good, so I kept doing it. I knew that it was good for me. And like anything, once you do it, and then you discover Wim Hof and there's different groups and such. And I went, oh, this is actually a thing.
Yeah.
And then I started researching about the release of the endorphins and the magnesium and all the reasons that it's good for you. So with my own practice, the sea swimming is something I do as I host a couple of meetups. One of them is Mental Health Swims. Mental Health Swims is UK wide, and it's peer support led again. It's peer led. Again, started kind of ready to host those when COVID hit, and I was just wild conscious of people meeting. And although we're meeting outdoors and there's a distance, I'm always aware of the impact it may have on others. If people are feeling anxious and they so the sea swimming, there's meetups. I also do a one-to-one for people who are particularly nervous of getting in and for whom the group setting just isn't comfortable.
Yeah.
That's gone really well, actually, because a lot of people just need one or two sessions of that, just that kind of comfort.
Yeah.
So the sea swimming, and then I do hikes as well. So the part-time work with Solace, and then my own ecotherapy practice is more about facilitation. And it's about removing barriers and making this accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about going back and retraining, but I wanted to keep it simple, that I'm not the therapist, nature is. And I just make that connection. It's a triadic relationship between the participant, nature, and me. And I provide that kind of connection. Then I step back and leave you to it. So there's the sea one. Hikes, I lead hikes called Hills for the Head. Where the beauty of that, again, it's been stopping and starting with COVID. The accessibility bit is that someone would like to try a hike, but they've no experience and they don't know where to go. They don't know what they'll need. They don't know how long it'll take. So I was surprised. Even I did one in Inishowen, and a few of the participants were from Carndona and had never been to Inishowen. When we went up to Oris, a couple of the participants were from Buncrana and they'd never been over the gap to Oris. So the idea is that if someone, feels they know that kind of need, that they'd like to get involved some way, I'm having a wee website built now, wherever you're up to, so you can look and choose, I'd like to try the sea swimming. There's a group meeting this time, or there's one-to-one that time. Or I'd like to try the hiking, but I've nobody to go with me. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know. There's an organised hike on that day, that time. I will have risk assessed it. I will have the first aid. I will have the survival blankets. I will know the route. I'm taking away all those layers that, make it difficult. And also for people who, it's the company. So if you turn up to a hike, for example, everybody else will be new. Because when I looked into it, a lot of the kind of things that you could do for the outdoors, it was all club based. And that was great if you were a member of that club.
Yeah.
Now, for me personally, it doesn't trouble me to go into a new group. Do you know, if there was a hill walking club, I'm comfortable to join in with a group of people that I don't know. For many people, that's not the case. For many people, that's difficult. So you can choose the sea swimming, the hiking, and then I do forest bathing as well. So it then, for maybe for some people, just the physical aspect of hiking or sea swimming is a bit much. So with the forest bathing, they're short sessions of about an hour. And again, we can use woodlands and forests differently. A person may go into the forest and they have their hood up and they have their earphones in and they're running through it or whatever. We do forest bathing sessions where it's very slow, it's mindful, it's invitations to open your senses. Again, the beauty of that is I'm not the therapist. The trees and the fantasides are what's benefiting you, but I'm giving you a means of doing that. And then there's retreats in the woods where it's a kind of a digital detox, disconnect, reconnect, where we go into woodlands and there's fire lighting and foraging and forest bathing and a drumming circle and just being. It's very simplistic. It's just being around a fire. But again, for some people, I don't know where to go. I don't have the equipment. Can I build a fire here? I don't know. Yeah. So that part is taken care of.
Yeah, taking away those kind of barriers to that. Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I'm struck by that you said there is that idea that nature is the therapist and that you're facilitating that. And I suppose the reason that sticks with me is because I always say to people that when they come to therapy from the first session, the goal is kind of that you don't need to come back to therapy. Like, we're always working towards there being an end in terms of having to come to me. And I suppose I'm struck by the fact that actually through you facilitating that kind of relationship with nature, it allows that person to then do that on their own as well. Yes. And build up the confidence to do that. And I was thinking about that I noticed recently one of the posts that you had made where you had kind of gone into your own garden to sit, and I kind of thought about like that idea of like, actually you don't need to go to we're surrounded by beautiful parks and beaches and everything, but there's also a lot to be said, and I noticed this myself, for actually going out into my own garden and just sitting with a cup of tea, and that's that building that relationship between the person and nature. And I think it's lovely that that's something that eventually the person won't need you to facilitate it because that relationship would be there.
That's it, exactly. And that's me stepping back out of it. It's just making it, and again, finding where the person's up to. So being able to dip in and dip out of different things and think, well, now the hike was too much for me, but I love the woodlands.
Yeah.
And very much that it's, as you say, it's strengthening the relationship, and then it carries on. You don't need to keep coming. Some people do keep coming back because the crack's great, and that's the group piece. But then, so that's if you like, I'm trying not to use the word work. I'm trying to find another way. When I talk about my work, because it so doesn't feel like work. So that would be for an individual, just kind of, I want to get out. I don't know where to go or what to do, but I know I want to get out. But then the other, where I've actually been doing a lot more work, is with groups. So, for example, a community group or a group that's already established, and maybe they have funding for a wellness program, which is great. And I did it for many, many years, a wellness program, and someone will come in and talk about stress and, ways to help your stress. And, there's the PowerPoint and all the rest of it. And it's great work. One of my programs is with nature in mind. It's the 5 ways to wellbeing over 6 weeks. The way I've done this, which is really important, is it's embedded in the community. So, for example, I did one quite well before COVID with a group in Strabane. So in Strabane, through the 6 weeks, they did fly fishing 1 week. They went to a care farm another week. They were in the community garden another week. It was important that I connected them with something in their community. So then I step back, and again, the person might think, I didn't really like the walking, but I love that fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've been to the Dennet Anglers, they've met Damien, they know him, they have some kind of it's the connection. It's the connection piece.
Mm-hmm.
And again, then I step back and leave you to it. So it's realistically sustainable. Now the retreats, I suppose, are kind of different. That is about getting away and, doing something completely different. But as far as possible, it's something in your local community that connects you with a group in your local community that then you carry on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is potentially a big question, but I'm thinking...
do you need the coffee? And I'll get the coffee.
Oh. What do you think it is that's caused people to lose those connections?
Consumerism and the busy, need, going all the time. It's an interesting question because it's actually only since the Industrial Revolution that we've been living like this. One of the things I do is like a timeline of human history, and it equates to 0.01% of our existence. We've been living as we do now. Indoors, artificial heat, artificial light, rubber-soled shoes. There's an interesting timeline. So it goes like this, where we were through evolution, and then we were transient people. We were, hunter-gatherers. Then we were agricultural. So this is how we lived. We were connected to nature in a very real way. And then you got to the Industrial Revolution, and it kind of goes like this. And then you got to the technological revolution, and the line goes whoop, where the disconnection from nature. I think it is relevant too, though, Patricia, that's in this part of the world. I was very lucky to spend time in Kenya researching depression, and it was incredible. The connection with nature and the understanding of its importance hadn't been lost. So to answer your question, I think it's because we've devalued it. We've devalued that innate connection, and everything is about productivity. and being productive, being still isn't valued. People love to tell you, oh, I'm so busy, I'm so busy. They don't have the same kind of pride in saying, I'm really laid back today, I haven't done much.
Yeah. And it's almost like we apologize when we say that, or we say it with embarrassment. Oh, do you know what? I haven't really done much today.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's the devaluing, and then the flip side of this, because we are in a crisis. The natural world is in crisis. So the other side of this is that by strengthening this relationship, I think people will want to protect it.
Yeah.
Rather than, no, I know you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that for the environment. If we could strengthen the relationship that may appear almost from a selfish viewpoint, this is good for me. But what that's naturally doing is there's a connection here. And once people feel it, see this, I laugh about it a wee bit as well, that I've never had to convince anyone that nature's good for them. This, the conversation usually goes ecotherapy, what is it today? Nature, mental health. At exactly the same time, people's response is, eco what? What's that? Never heard of that. Is that new? But at exactly the same time, they're going, aye, nature's good for me. Aye, I know that. Of course I know that. The reminder.
Yeah.
So I think the disconnection has come from our skewed value of what's important, and being productive and consuming and producing things and having things, and not seeing it anymore.
Yeah, and I think when we look at like the amount of mental health issues that there are and how those are increasing, I think sometimes we don't make the connection between, the way that we're living and the impact that that's having on everybody's mental health. That constantly having to, push yourself forward, as you say, be productive and things like that, and that doing nothing isn't valued is a huge thing. That, like, as I said, that people coming from that position of having to apologize for, like, oh, I didn't do anything today. So I think that the connection between actually how we're living and how it's impacting on our mental health, people aren't really making it. And I suppose it's that reflection and taking that step back, and nobody's really going, hang on a minute, what are we doing here? Some people are, but I think on the whole, like, most people aren't. They're just they're so caught up in it that they're just moving forward with it.
Yes.
Yeah. With COVID, do you think that'll have, change how people view these kind of things? I suppose I read an article recently by somebody who was saying that, there's so many restrictions in place, and one of the only things that we can do is kind of go for a walk. And perhaps that has increased our relationship with nature, and people are maybe going to become a bit more protective of their spaces. Do you think that's something that'll, that COVID has perhaps impacted on?
Definitely. I'm certain of it. The increase in, like, gardening, people taking an interest, as you say, in their wee garden, even house plants. I
Yeah.
read that they maybe, as you had said, because people are working from home, to make that environment. Sea swimming has increased by 300 and something percent. So I think COVID, yes, it has, for many people, if it's had the impact of slowing down in some ways, it's made them notice what's there. I know certainly when we were in the tighter restrictions, as much as I go away and do my hikes and swims and whatnot, I did wee walks around here that I'd never done before.
Yeah.
I was jumping in the car and going to, further afield when I didn't need to. So yes, I think that people it's the slowing down that's helped them to notice it. And if we can keep that connection,
Yeah, I
going
think that's
forward.
it. Can we keep that connection is the big one.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but I think once people feel the awareness is there, even people will pay more money for a house on a tree-lined street. And people are drawn to green spaces at times of stress. But I'm wondering also, is part of the value in that we very much equate value with monetary value, and it's free. So is there something in that this hour that I'm spending walking in a forest or going to the beach, there's a value that, it's the fact that it's free. Are we devaluing it? Because that's how we value everything, really, is monetary. There's so much. Maybe that's part of it.
Thank you so much for sharing with me, like all about what you're doing, and it's so interesting to hear. And one of the ideas behind me asking other people to come on the podcast was, I am obviously a psychologist, and most of my sessions are spent sitting across from somebody, but I know that that doesn't work for everybody. And I do an awful lot of work with young people, and I find young people in particular find it very difficult to have that face-to-face intense conversations. So I'm always bringing in things like, well, let's kind of do colouring in, or let's play a board game or something that takes us away from sitting so intensely looking at each other. And in Scotland, I haven't heard much of it here now, but there was an introduction of what they called a green prescription, which was the idea that you get out, the GP literally prescribed that you need to go for a walk once a week. And I think the idea behind that is great as well. But I just love the idea of there being a different way of doing therapy, because sitting in a room with somebody does not work for everybody. And I think often people don't realize that. So they maybe go and have a therapy appointment, and they come away and they feel disheartened because that hasn't worked. And it's about trying to explain to other people that actually you need to try different things for different people, and you need to build almost like a toolkit for yourself in terms of perhaps different therapies. And on some occasions it might be that going and sitting talking to somebody face to face and sitting is helpful, but on other occasions I think getting out for a walk, or that ecotherapy approach would be more helpful, and that group based where you can talk if you want to but you don't have to. And even for some people, that idea of being part of a group, and maybe not talking about themselves in any great detail, but the fact that they belong to a group and they go for that walk and things like that, that's so powerful, that social connection. So it's really lovely to hear about it, and lovely to hear about it for me, since I've just moved home, like that it's happening in the area, and so that I can kind of let people know about it as well. In terms of if somebody wanted to get involved or contact you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, at the moment, it's still, I've had a wee bit of a, what's the word, relationship with social media. that was a difficult one for me, Patricia, because all of what I'm kind of advocating is moving away from screens, but because I want to reach people who are indoors online, I had to be. So I'm on Facebook, Michaela Mc Daid, Ecotherapy. Instagram is @with nature in mind. And that's all I can do. 2 platforms is that's all I can cope with. But I'm actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm getting a wee website built. So that'll be available too. And that'll be where people will be able to go in, browse, and find exactly what works for them. So you can get me on social media until I have all of that website stuff done.
Great. I'll put a wee link to that as well. There's like show notes at the bottom of the podcast, so I'll put a wee link to that as well if people want to find out a bit more as well. That gives them a choice to do that. But thank you so much. I think I could ask so many more questions, and maybe it might be that maybe we come back to it like for another episode or something if you were open to that. But I'm really grateful for you taking the time.
We'll go walk and chat the next time. Thank you so much.